Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly, and my co-host is Janet Corsi. The topic of today's show is the pros and cons of collaboration. Our guests for today's show are Lance Taubold, Chris Keaton, and Rick Taubold. Before we get to our guest, my pal and I would like to read a few fun quips or quotes. And Jan, would you like to start, please?
I sure would. I think there should be collaboration, but under my thumb. Ilya Kazan.
All right. And Lance?
Yoko Ono is quoted as having once said, "I'm not interested so much in collaboration. You see that from the history of my albums."
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that she said that. And Chris?
Everywhere I go, I'm asked if I think the university stifles writers. My opinion is that they don't stifle enough of them. There's many bestseller that could have been prevented by a good teacher. Flannery O'Connor.
All right. All right. And Rick?
When I visit a new bookstore, I demand cleanliness, computer monitors, and rigorous alphabetization. When I visit a second-hand bookstore, I prefer indifferent housekeeping, sleeping cats, and sufficient organizational chaos. And Fadiman.
Is that not true or what?
Yeah.
All right. And mine is on Twitter. Angela L. wrote, "When the voices go quiet in my head, are my characters mad at me?" And Greg T. responded, "Maybe it just means your meds are working." If you are just tuning in, you are listening to Aspects of Writing. Our guests for today's show are Lance Taubold, Chris Keaton, and Rick Taubold. The topic of today's show is the pros and cons of collaboration. Our first guest is Chris Keaton. Per his Facebook page, Chris, like many deranged people, writes screenplays and actually believes he's pretty good at it. His delusion has brought him to write at least a dozen feature films and numerous short scripts for questionable quality. Several directors have been enabling Chris Keaton's mental illness by actually producing his short screenplays and optioning his features. Thankfully, misguided goodwill alone cannot produce a feature film, so he hasn't traumatized a feature audience yet. But if his madness, if his madness goes unchecked, it could happen in the near future.
He's been a bad influence on you already today.
I know. If you feel compelled to peek into the world of a madman, you can check out his IMDb page and website, as I did. He is the author and a co-author of 10 books. He has 14 credits on IMDb as a writer and the executive producer of The Red Room and associate producer of the short Aperture. Currently, Chris is the co-author of the book Mosaic. What did I leave out, Chris?
Well, I also wrote the companion piece of the Mosaic that we're going to discuss today, the piece of the Mosaic. And I currently have a novella out right now, The Living Dead Girl.
Oh, yeah. I think I put that on our
Sounds like
website.
zombie.
For the listeners, just go to Aspects of Writing and you can see it and click on it and check it out. All right, Chris, where can we learn? Well, tell us about the book, first of all. I'm interested in the one that you collaborated on first, and then tell me why you wrote the other companion to it.
Okay, so the Mosaic it came about because of one of my numerous screenplays, and I thought, hey, it'd be nice to have people actually read what I've written. So the only way to do that's prose. But I was shopping the script around and ran into a producer that said, okay, the budget needed for the screenplay would require that you have to have sold a couple screenplays with a budget of at least $50 million, which, of course, I haven't. In the current rate of the market, I was like, there was no way I was going to do that.
Yeah.
He goes, or if it's based on a top-selling book. So maybe I can make a book.
Yeah.
And so I went searching. There's plenty of online communities, and I put a word out that I was looking for someone to help me with it because I didn't do prose. I've wrote some flash fiction before, but just screenplays. And the writing style you need for screenplays completely different than what you need for a prose novel. And I didn't have that skill, and I like to move fast. I like to get stuff done. So I'm like, I need to bring in someone that has that expertise. And so I had a bunch of people pass, and then someone who read my screenplay got contacted with Rick and said, hey, this guy's looking for somebody. And now we got together to do this book.
So what is the book about, though?
Right. So the book is these twin girls are living with their grandparents because their parents had passed away. Their grandparents happened to live in a museum.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So they stumble across a basement they didn't even know they had and found a magical mosaic. So the history of the mosaic is it contains all the magic in the world. And over time, it's broken up and its pieces scattered. And by them discovering it, they triggered its existence to an evil witch that was looking for it, so she could gain control of it. So right now, her grandparent was keeping it, protected in the basement, and they blew the cover. So now they have.
So the grandmother knew about it.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't tell them about it.
Oh.
So they stumbled across it, and she's like, what are we going to do now? So that sets a lot of action in motion. So they have to try to put the mosaic back together to keep it, out of the hands of the evil
Evil
queen.
witch, yeah.
Wow.
Oh.
And what is the companion book about?
Now the companion, because the mosaic's been passed down through time, I think we picked some deep pharaoh who dug it out and originally broke a couple pieces off, releasing some of the magic beings inside. The pieces have been scattered throughout time. And so what they find is just the large portion of it that's still intact. And so the pieces tells the stories of the people who have stumbled across these pieces, either the intact pieces that are imparting some kind of magical power or influence in their lives, or the pieces that have been broke, releasing magical beings. So these are just individual stories set in that same universe to give you like a better understanding of the whole mosaic story.
Now, you created the story, and Rick helped collaborate in writing the story?
Right, but with the screenplay, it's a very basic framework
Right,
without
right,
a lot
yes,
of
yeah,
detail. So
yeah.
bringing Rick in, it really helped enhance and add to the story, making it a full.
Just curious as to where this idea came from.
Yeah.
Oh,
Were you lucid when you wrote this, or?
like, I have all kinds of ideas flowing through my head. Thankfully, most of them I just throw away.
Good.
But I was doing a lot of family-friendly stuff, and I'm like, I need a fantasy. And so I came up trying to do what-ifs. Every time you write, you think about what-ifs. And I'm like, what if all of the fables and all of the mythologies that we have are really coming from one source? So then I started thinking, well, what could that source be, and why do we not see the influence right now?
Yeah.
So I had it so they were there at one point, but then it all got trapped into this mosaic, separating us from the magical world. But we still have some of these fables and mythologies now because some of that's coming out, breaking free from the mosaic.
Yeah. And what about your book, The Living Dead Girl?
Oh, The Living Dead Girl is, I thought of it as, it's a sequel to Sixth Sense. But it's really about a girl who can speak to the dead. She has that ability her whole life. So the ghosts come to her, ask for help. And through trying to help one of them, she gets herself in trouble with bad guys. And so she is nearly killed. So she has a near-death experience.
Oh.
And that touch of the near-death experience gives her the ability to not only communicate with the dead, but now they want to do her bidding. They see her as an awe, so now they'll do what she says. So she learns that power. She's trying to hunt down the people who have did her wrong, and that leads to that power with responsibility. Well, she makes mistakes, and that propels her on to try to find the true source of her power and learn that she doesn't have to be a slave to her past and her parentage. So some secrets revealed in there.
I am curious, one thing, you mentioned it just a minute ago, but I'd like a little more detail on it. When you said that you decided to write the novel, your producer had suggested that? So the movie's not out yet.
Well, there's no movie. The producer said the only way you're going to sell a screenplay is if it was based on a best-selling book.
Oh, okay.
So I'm like, okay, well, then I'll make this a best-selling book.
Okay, that's great. Okay. And Jan?
I think I get the honors of introducing Lance Taubold. Lance has been a Metropolitan opera singer. I've heard him sing. And Broadway performer and soap opera actor. He currently lives and performs and writes in Las Vegas. Taubold has previously collaborated on Ripper, A Love Story, and it is a historical romantic thriller with author Richard Devon, and we've had him on.
Yes.
And on Two Fronts with Sergeant Adam Finner.
And we've had him on.
And we've had him on. And this won the IBA 2014 Benjamin Franklin Award for Best First Nonfiction. That is a big honor.
Yes.
Taubold was also a former writer and book critic of MV Man magazine and is currently working on several projects, including a paranormal romance series with New York Times best-selling author Heather Graham called Lucifer's Angels. Lance, My gosh, have you got time for anything else in your life? What else have you been up to?
I know you read it, and I go, I've done all this. When did I find time to do that and like have a job and everything else? But yeah, you just keep going is what it is, and just you don't think about it all. See, now what you did to me is you overwhelmed me with everything that I do. So it's like
You overwhelm me with all you do.
And Jen, I think you have a
Thanks,
playbill
Jen.
under your phone.
Oh, I do. I do. And this is something you just recently did.
yes, I did.
Singing for the Boys. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's a new musical about singing for the troops in 1943, and it's a backstage onstage type of story is what it was. The characters are Al Jolson, Deanna Durbin, Judy Garland, and then the MC of the show. That would be me. And so it's there were 65 songs in it. So
Incredible.
Now,
but you get a
originally-
lot of backstage and story ideas and all of that. We actually did it here in Vegas, and the Judy Garland character was not in it, so we had to redo it. We did it a month ago in Los Angeles, and the Judy Garland character was in it then. So we just actually what it turned out is they're almost two different types of shows, but they both worked.
Yeah. How difficult was that to go from the 4 characters that you did in L.A. to down to the 3 characters?
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be a lot harder, but it really wasn't. Just re-choreographed and
Because some of the
recast
songs were done by Judy
songs.
Garland.
Yes,
Yeah.
they were. And then all of a sudden, the other performers had to take them over, myself included. Being a high tenor, though, Judy Garland's voice, and she's got such a low voice.
Yes.
So it kind of worked for my voice. So I ended up taking over about 3 or 4 of her songs, and then a couple of the others we just didn't use at all.
Right.
But but it worked, and I was really surprised how well it worked.
So what is
Very
your
good.
latest book?
My latest book, I just had Zodiac Lovers 5 came out.
Woo.
So I've had 4 in the series. They're novellas, paranormal, male romance novellas. And there were 3 in each of the first 4. But then it was discovered by astronomers that there are 2 new signs of the zodiac, Cetus the whale and Ophiuchus the serpent bearer.
Ooh.
Yes, I know. Astronomers have recognized that they're out there. As the
Talk
sun
about
passes through the
imagination, huh?
zodiac. Yeah, exactly. So astrologers are never going to go for it because it just screws up the entire zodiac wheel. So that's not going to happen.
Well,
but
but
it gave me the opportunity to write 2 new stories, of which I think they're my 2 favorites. So I just had that come out this past month.
Are there going to be more new cards in the tarot card series?
Oh, that in the Never Fear series. Yes,
Yeah.
we have our next one planned for the early next year is Never Fear Urban Legends. But as we like to do something different with everything, we're going to divide it up in the world. So it'll be 6 continents. So it'll probably be 3 stories, urban legends from each of the 6 continents. So it'll probably be 18 stories in it. So
Fabulous.
we've got a bunch of authors lined up for that, and I'll be one of those, writing one of that. I think I'm going for either Hawaii or the Philippines. They have some great legends there.
Oh, yes, they do.
Yes.
And
So,
where can we learn more about your work?
you can find me on Amazon. You can go to my Facebook page. So all of those anywhere, and you can find out all about the books
1330
and everything.
Books?
1330 Books. So you can go onto the our 1330 Books website and find out all about the books and what we're doing and what is upcoming.
Okay. If you are just tuning in, you are listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, and my co-hostess, Janet Corsi. Again, our guests are Lance Taubold, Chris Keaton, and Rick Taubold. The topic of today's show is the pros and cons of collaboration, and we have an expert panel here.
Yeah.
All right. Our third guest is Rick Taubold. Rick was born in St. Louis, Missouri. So does that mean you were born there too, Lance?
No, it doesn't. I was born after they moved
Oh,
to
okay.
St. Louis.
And that was before the archway was built, the gate. Yeah, the gateway. His college training and degrees are in chemistry, biology, and nutritional biochemistry. In grad school, Rick was an avid bike rider. Back before he was totally serious about his writing, Rick found time to enjoy woodworking and built several pieces of furniture. I actually do that as well. He and his wife, Rose, currently live in Rochester, New York. And I forgot to ask you, Chris, where are you from?
Tucson, Arizona.
Okay, all right.
It's
And
slightly
that's-
cooler than here. Surprising.
Really? Oh, yeah, well, it's
Yes.
a little higher. Yeah, a little
yeah.
bit higher elevation. Rick's serious interest for writing began in 1991 with starting his first novel. His first published short story came out of a series of writing workshops. After several revisions, More Than Magic was published in 2004. Rick also has several published short stories and poems, which are available to read under short works. His most memorable writing career moment occurred in the 2005 Book Expo America when Henry Winkler asked for an autographed copy of his first novel. And I'm sure that would have been, I can't even imagine.
It was like,
An awe moment.
Yeah.
He is currently on the board of directors for Silver Pen, a free online forum and critique site for writers. Along with his wife, he is the editor and publisher of, tell me if I get this wrong, Fabula Argentina?
Argentia.
Okay. Quarterly online magazine, and he co-hosts with Scott Gumbo.
I think that's how Scott pronounces it.
That's the blog Write Well, Write to Sell. His nickname in college was Twig. What else could you call a 5'10", 125-pound person? And I'm telling you, I'm 5'10", and I was the exact same weight in college. And this is really cool, too. Once on his birthday, the guys in his door made him a pizza, then stripped him down to his underwear, tossed him in the shower, and dumped gold medal flour on him. Where I went to college, they picked me up, and they were going to throw me in what was called Theta Pond. That was the thing they did on your birthday. Thank God the pond was frozen over and they couldn't do it.
That would have been painful, I think.
I'm guys, please don't do that. All right, Rick, what did I leave out that you care to admit to?
I don't think anything.
All right.
Oh, I've got some stories.
Bad.
Okay, Chris, what can you tell us about Mosaic that Chris maybe hasn't told us?
Well, I guess probably the most interesting thing is after I found out about the piece of writing, the screenplay, my wife had always said to me, I should write something young adult. Well, I got this screenplay from Chris, never told her about it. 9 months
wow.
later, after I had the first draft done, then I showed it to her. Because I already had so much on my plate at that time, and
Yeah.
she's always saying, you don't need anything else on your plate. And it's only gotten worse.
Yeah.
It's a bigger plate now, right?
She liked it, and and it took us a few years after I first got the thing, going back and forth to polish it and get it there. But it's been a great experience.
Yeah. What was it like? And this is an interesting thing. We're going to go into collaboration in a minute. But before we do that, you two collaborated without ever having met. And I would like for you to discuss how that came about. Chris?
Well, the internet's a wonderful thing. So there's plenty of places now to get help with your writing. And so I started out with Zoetrope, zoetrope.com. In its heyday, there was, hundreds of people on there writing screenplays and a lot of people with a lot of good experience. And so I would put my screenplays out there. They'd give me feedback, and then I would hone my craft. So thankfully, I got a lot of help there, met a lot of great people, met my mentor there. And so I knew they had other groups for prose writing. And so I joined the short story group and then started talking to those people there. And when I needed to find the screenplay, that's where I put my ad out first to find the co-writer for this. And so through those channels, Rick picked up interest and agreed to do it. And so it was all over the internet, and we continue to do everything over the internet. And it wasn't until Friday that we actually met and spoke to each other.
Like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the whole book came together from collaboration over the internet,
Yeah, all
communicating
emails.
emails. Yeah.
That was it.
And some phone calls.
No, never phone
Never.
call.
Oh, my God.
Never spoken on the phone.
Yeah. And then
Wow.
the publication of it was done through 1330.
It is, yes.
Fortunately, you have a brother who had
Yeah, it helps.
Publishing company.
Yeah.
and who liked the
Enter
book.
publishing company. But that's fascinating to me. I'm sorry. What was the site you went to again to
It was
find?
a Zoetrope, zoetrope.com. It's Francis Ford Coppola's site to get people collaborating on work and helping each other out, doing reviews. In the early days before I got there, he would actually visit the site, and his staff would review the top winners because they all get voted on by reviewers' votes.
Oh, okay.
And then, but by the time I moved on, they realized there's just way too much screenplays and not enough, because even there's only so many made each year.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
there was something like 10,000 registered every year.
Oh my God.
And there might be 11 spec screenplay sales.
Yeah.
You know, so mostly it's all indie. So that's what I learned is stop dealing with the Hollywood people and talk to the local people.
Right.
Because they're the ones making the indie movies. Now, all my budgets are way too high for indie, so I had to start changing my writing style. But that was a great place to meet people who still, you know, cared to help. And my first couple got great reviews and said, "Oh, hey, this is wonderful." But here are these things how you can make it even better. And so through
That's
then, I
great.
learned what the difference was between a good screenplay and one that you can sell.
So it's kind of like a writer's critique group.
Right.
You know, only for screenplays.
Now, even there, they even have smaller groups where you send in writing samples, and then they'll approve you for the group because everyone in there will try to help. You know, the internet's gotten so big now; there's
Yeah.
so much noise.
Yeah.
You have to like focus a little
It's
more.
hard to figure out where I do that all the time. All right, the Oxford Dictionary's definition of collaboration is the action of working with someone to produce something. And I think there's collaboration in almost everything we do in life, pretty much.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to read a few pros and cons about collaboration and then discuss the issues as we go. And here are 7 pros for writing a book with a collaborator or co-author. And Rick, I'm going to let you start and read the first 3.
Okay. Value. Potentially, you can write a better book that provides more value, wisdom, expertise, fun, accessibility, real-life examples, etc. for readers.
And he just basically talked about how going online and Chris presenting his work to other people, that's exactly what he did. He increased the value of what his screenplays were.
Yeah.
All right. And Rick?
Creds. The book will have more credibility if your co-author possesses expertise you lack, which
And
is
that's
often the case here.
absolutely, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay.
And time savings. You have less to write. not
Not
Oh,
true.
yeah, I think that one's questionable.
as Chris mentioned before, screenplays and novels are
different things.
opposite ends, and screenplay is little more than really a broad outline. It's not even that detailed.
Yeah, it all has to be visual because everything you put on the page is what has to be seen on the screen. So you can't go into someone's head to give the reader more of a understanding because the audience isn't going to get that understanding.
Well, we had Kelly Schwartz on the show a couple shows back, and he's a local producer here in Las Vegas. He's been around for like 11, 12 years, and he does his own independent films, and then he works with the major studios when they come to town. And he said the same thing you just said, that one of the things that he did that I like that you're doing is that he just figured out that he always did the movie, but he never did a book with the movie. So he's doing one called Alien Domicile, and he decided, let me put the book out to help gain more attention. Because you can get an international audience even if you don't get a domestic audience when you do a movie, or particularly an independent film. But if you want that domestic audience, they want more, it seems like. They want something they can relate to.
We're a multimedia environment right now, so
Right.
you
Yeah.
put it everywhere you're at. Now, one of my mentors I like to follow was Richard Matheson. He did Twilight Zone, it's a lot of great movies, but he always wrote prose work to go with it. Now, some of it was, business-like, because now he controls that intellectual property.
Yeah.
Where with movies, you just write the script, it's gone, it's not yours anymore.
Yeah.
But if you also write a book or a short story or
That's
a novella
yours.
with it, it's yours.
Yeah.
Yep.
So your
Yeah,
name
we
will
talked
always be
about that as
attached,
well.
Yeah.
And I do the same thing. I write all my stories are usually written in script format first, even though I've never produced one. But I always write it as a script because that's the first thing I ever wrote. And then I'll go back and put it in novel format. So like Rick was saying, you really just have a skeleton.
Right, just a framework.
And then you go back and you elaborate and create the settings and the surroundings and maybe add a few people.
I think what the hardest part was for me is you think about screenplay, it's just an outline, but it's nothing with the characters.
Yeah.
Because in a screenplay, the movie, the actors and the director bring out the characters and the personality.
Right.
That's not in the screenplay. I had to
Right.
basically get to know all of his characters.
Oh, yeah. So you would had to have gone
Yeah.
through all that.
That's why it took us so long. I had to get to know his characers.
So did
Get
you
into
ask him
their
for an
head.
outline of the characters themselves or a description of the
I
characters?
tried.
Well, it's a learning experience. So somewhere along the line, we're like, okay, we have to keep this stuff straight. So we started putting down notes, And then for the next one we're working on, there's a whole Bible, so we have the whole history now. We have details about each character. So we know that this is what we needed to build for the first one. So now we've learned that lesson, so that it won't take us 7 years to do the next one.
I'd just like to add one little thing there. Stephen King, I believe, said a quote of something about secrets in the basement. And what he meant by that is he would always have more information kept down in the basement or aside than he ever put into his books.
Right.
But you need to know that because that's the background which helps you form the character and how they're going to act. You may never reveal some of these facts, their deep, dark past, but it helps you to motivate the characters. And that's, like I said, that's what I needed to do. I needed to get to know his characters.
And I think that's probably a great experience for you, Chris, because having written scripts and novels, in the script, you do have to have the character in your mind. But when you go to write that novel, you really have to bring
to know
out,
a lot more, really,
and you give more detail.
You have that room too. There's no need to say, "Hey, I've got 2 lines to describe this character," and then everything has to be played out through their action or dialogue in a screenplay. I could take a couple paragraphs in a book to really let you know what's going on
And how they think.
Right. You don't have that time in a screenplay, but the novel you can. So it was a learning experience for me to say, "Hey, I can put all that extra stuff in there."
Well, and then, like, for instance, with I'll give you an example. I like to give examples of what I've done. In one of my books, and I've told this one a few times.
Which book?
The Emblem.
The Emblem.
Yes.
Good book.
Came out in 95. In The Emblem, I had a character who was going to kill someone. But if you write the screenplay, I don't have to give a mindset of that character per se, because the director or the producer, or usually the director, is going to say, this is what I want this character to do or say. But in the book, I had to set that up for the reader because there's no one directing you there.
Well, you're the director in the book.
Yeah. So I had to set up that mindset to where he was playing a cat and mouse game with this character and teasing her and making her think he was going to rape her, but he really wasn't. And he was just doing this to taunt her up until the time he was going to kill her, and he wanted her to think he wasn't going to kill her. And then just when she thought he's going to let me go, that's when he... But anyway, you can't... In a script, you can write so much, but the director has to give you that whole mindset. Or the actor, really, is the one who has to portray that on the screen.
It's a team sport, filmmaking, is the way I look at it. Is you might start the screenplay and you give your... And I've learned some of the art of directing through the screenplay, which you're not supposed to, so I hide it real nice.
Yeah.
But once the director gets it, once the actor gets it, they're all interpreting everything in their own way. So what comes out isn't always the same as what you thought it was.
Right.
But you know that, so if there's like key moments, you really nail down what that's supposed to be in the screenplay, knowing though in the end, a lot of stuff might get retranslated.
Yeah, and my point in bringing that up is that I can imagine what Rick had to go through, because when you write the script and all that detail's not in there, he has to help create that for the book in order for the book to make sense.
To give you an idea of the length of the thing, I think I figured his screenplay was about 20,000 words, something like that. The novel is over 80,000 words. An idea of how much we had to expand that and add all that. Yet, same story.
Yeah.
Well, we added a few things.
Because most scripts are 80 to 120 pages.
Yeah, most.
Yeah. So, yeah. All right, Rick, Chris, I'm going to let you read the next few.
All right, promotion and sales. Additional authors can provide more man or woman power to promote the book and reach more people. Jane continues to hold anger workshops and seminars, which I do not, and it's due to Jane that our book continues to sell, and I get a royalty check every quarter.
Okay, that's interesting. So you say you don't really... Well, who's going to be doing the promoting on this? Because I know you both were doing a book signing last night.
Everyone has to do promoting. That's the way it works nowadays. There's so many avenues out there that if you're involved, you promote. That's just the way it works.
You should anyway.
Yeah, well...
Yeah. I have authors who tell me they don't go do book signings.
Well, they're everyone has their own strategy.
Yes.
But yeah, you need to promote.
Yeah. And that's interesting, the word you just used, promote, because we have authors that some are best-selling authors on Amazon who did not do book signings, but they sold like 2,000 or 3,000 copies a month on Amazon because they know how to go out there and use social media to promote.
Right, and you have to hit all. I don't know. Book signings are great for the audience that shows up to it.
Yeah.
I said, but with the web, you have a much larger audience.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of people think of it's advertising is what you're doing. Advertising, but in a more directed sense.
Yeah. And number 5, Chris?
All right, so your co-author may also provide connections that you do not have, like having a brother who is a publisher.
It says that somewhere. Oh,
Oh, that wasn't in my script.
Connections.
But I mean that could be true if you're co-authoring with a large writer that already has experience, because I know there's some writers out there that do that frequently. In our case, Rick had the skills in writing prose that I didn't.
Yeah.
And through working with him, I've learned an awful lot. And so I'm like, that's definitely worth the collaboration in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the connections are important, and I think networking in general is important. You can't really do anything by yourself, and anyone who says I go out there, I did it. I mean, I say I do my show by myself, but obviously Jan's on the show every week, so obviously I don't do it by myself. But even in publishing, we always get advice from someone, whether it be Lance or someone else that you know. And even if you're not asking them directly, if you're asking them a question, they're giving you the answer you want to hear. So it is important to get the information, and make those connections.
Well, collaboration is getting connections. Back to what we were talking about. In the screenplay world, it's a small world, and you have to make connections if you want to even get your scripts read.
Yeah.
So you meet this person. I went to one film fest, made a ton of connections. So this person knows that person that needs this. So they've met me, so they could open the door. And so it's a requirement in filmmaking to make connections. With novels, I thought, it's going to be a lot less, but nope, there's still need plenty of connections.
Well, because you've got to get it in the stores, so you have to make the connections. If you're going to a city you've never been to before, like I think Rick said he's never been here, and Chris, you said you've been here like 2 or 3 times. Yeah. You've got to know where to go, what stores to go to, who does what, because even in this industry, like Barnes & Noble is a good example, you can't get your book in all the stores here in Las Vegas. I mean, Lance, you pretty much have. But the thing is, not everybody can. Right. And so you have to know which stores to go to. You don't want to waste your time driving all over the city trying to figure out where can I put my book. So having those connections, especially in a different city, if you know someone, give them a call, ask them to do some legwork for you. So, and Lance, I'm going to let you take number 6.
All right. When our book came out, there were issues with dimensions and cover. Mm-hmm. Bookstores would not stock the book despite the great publicity we were getting. So even though they had a long-term relationship with the publisher, they did agree to republish the book with a new title and ISB number, so it would be considered a new book, in order to capitalize on our PR and actually have the book in stores. Without this relationship, our book would have been dead in the water. These were the days before Amazon was as big as it is now. Bookstores were still the main way books got sold. It's hard to say what relationships your co-author may have that can help the book, but this is definitely something to consider.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this whole thing about publicity is, did you guys talk about any kind of publicity campaign before you ventured out?
We probably should have.
Yes, we should have.
Well, it's also an ongoing thing. I mean, because certain social media and ways to publicize your book keep changing, and certain things work for certain books.
Right.
So you have to just unfortunately just
trial and error.
Investigate everything and see what's going to work, and if you find something, latch onto it and really go for that.
Absolutely.
I'd just like to add one quick thing here. What was true 5 years ago in indie publishing,
it's gone today.
It's gone today. You can't say what worked before is going to work now. You have to keep trying new things.
Well, your first book came out in 1991.
No, 2004.
Oh, 2004, but you started writing in 1991.
Yeah.
Okay. And your first book came out when?
2013. My
first book came out in 1995. And we're talking about completely 100% different industry. There was no online publishing, with digital publishing where you just call up and say, I need 20 books, ship them out. No Amazon, really. It was completely different. So I've seen that complete swing, and it's so much easier today, to be honest with you. I mean, it's still a lot of hard work, and it's still difficult to figure out what to do. But thank goodness for the digital age.
Absolutely.
Well, it's true. In your book, I mean, if you were with a big publisher, you basically have a month where the publisher is going to help you, and it's in the stores. And then if it doesn't hit it's gone.
Yeah.
But now your book. It's infinite. It can stay out there forever. You can keep promoting it because it's if you're at a signing or anything else, it's a book that's 3 or 4 years old, but it's new to that person.
That's right.
To those people, and
Yep.
you pitch it to them and tell them about the book, and like, oh, this sounds great, and it is a brand new book to them.
Yes.
They don't care that it came out 3 or 4 years, 10 years ago.
Yeah. I like what you said about the publisher staying in touch with things because, and it's a very tricky industry, even when you go to a traditional publisher. I had a friend who wrote a book about, it was about Joan Crawford, and he had gone on the road. He had sold like 150,000 copies of the book, and then Christina came out with her copy of Mommy Dearest. They dropped that man like a hot potato because it was no longer relevant, because the fact that she's the real deal. I mean, she lived it.
Yeah.
So, so it's interesting how you can be going great and all of a sudden something happens and that's it. You've got to stay on top of the publicity.
You do. You absolutely do.
And, even with the traditional publisher, it's not always going to save you.
Mm-mm. Well, and that's why they talk about backlist now with the publishers, and but so many authors now, they've had books out for years and years, and their publishers aren't publishing their backlist. So authors are buying up their old books and then republishing them themselves. Or through a smaller publisher. And they're coming back out, and they're going back out, finding an entire new audience. You've got a whole new generation. We've got several authors that own the rights to the books, and I said, what are you doing with them? Well, they're just sitting there. I said, well, why aren't they out there? The book's been 20 years old. There's a new generation. You have a new audience.
But that's the same thing for the movie industry. Particularly if you're an independent producer, because we also talked to Kelly about this.
Yeah.
He had a movie that came out 8 years ago. It didn't get any legs here in the U.S. It got a little bit distribution overseas. And then now you've got all these networks out there, like Hulu, Amazon, all the newer. So Amazon approached him about a movie that came out 8 years ago, and it's now going to be re-released on Amazon.
That's great.
So yeah, he'll have a whole new
great.
audience because people have forgotten about it by now.
Right.
So he'll get a domestic audience he didn't have before. So it's true with the books as well. And we had an author on who did the same thing. Actually, in her case, one of the publishers died, so she got the rights back, and they sat on it for a couple years, she and her sister, and then they decided, you know what, let's go out there and put it out ourselves. So you can rebirth all these things.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And you couldn't do it before, because if the publisher had your book, it was theirs, and they had it. And if they didn't do anything with it, you were
dead.
dead.
Well,
You
even
were
if
dead
you
in
got
the
it
water.
back, it would be hard to do the publishing yourself.
Oh, yeah, you couldn't.
But now, I mean, all the functions out there, you just put it out there.
Right.
Amazon takes care of it, or
Right.
CreateSpace takes care of it.
Right. But the collaboration part of this is what's important too, because you're actually collaborating with a publisher, and I think people don't understand that. When you're working with a publisher, it's a collaboration as well, because you have to do the publicity.
Definitely.
It's a misnomer to think that publisher is going to go out there and do everything for you, and you guys are realizing that, I'm sure.
Well, I knew it before, because
Yeah.
I had seen how the world was changing.
Yeah.
Publishers don't do any. If you're just let's say think you're a J.K. Rowling, they're going to give you a minimal push to start with. If it takes off, they're happy. If it doesn't take off, bye-bye.
Right, and that's exactly true. Yeah.
And that you can't emphasize it enough, because I run into authors all the time that say, "I'll get a publisher," and no, I'm going to go for a big publisher.
Yeah.
And I said, you realize the first thing they say to you is, "Well, what are you going to do to publicize your book?"
All right.
And
what platform do you have?
Yes,
That's the number one thing. At least, Chris, you have your movies to fall back on as a platform. That helps.
Well, yeah, it brings in an audience too.
Yeah.
It's cross. I don't say it's cross genre. It's just cross media.
And with Heather Graham, who's one of your authors, she had a platform already before she decided to self-publish and then go with you. So they always ask. I mean, I'm just like everybody else. I sent out hundreds of query letters and got hundreds of rejections. And the one thing they always ask for is, what is your platform? What have you done? What are you noted for? What have you done that's unique? So,
Yeah.
All right. And Jan, you take number 7.
Support. It can be motivating to work with a co-author. You can write your book faster and more efficiently. You can help each other get past any blocks, as my co-authors and I have as my co-authors and I did several times. Well, I only have one question for Lance, and maybe you can help answer this. And this goes with Ripper, a Love Story.
Okay.
If in the middle of the night you had a sudden change of direction, would your collaborator have been so easily moved to go another direction? I mean, this book flows beautifully.
Thank you.
But what if you had a completely change of mind? Because my characters in my book rewrote the book.
Well, it seemed with this book, because we were literally on the same page as far as the characters. So both of us have acting backgrounds, so we get into the head of the characters, which is what every author should do. You're in their head because you're writing from what you know and what they're doing. So if I had something, as long as it made sense with the character and the way the things had been going, or if he did, and say, hey, what if she did this in the book? And I went, oh, that's great. Yes, of course. And she would do this. And what if she did this? Because this would make sense to do that. And they go, oh, that's right. So you kind of talk it out. As long as you're on the same page with your characters and where they're going, and things are logical for that character. Yeah, so I guess you're kind enough to say how well it flowed, but I guess that would be why it flowed so well.
But, we had Richard Devon and Jeff Depew on, and they co-authored a book.
Right.
And it was interesting to hear how they had to get past what you're talking about. Jeff had a direction he wanted to go in with the book. Rick, he constantly Richard wanted to change things sometimes. And Jeff had a difficult time. He would throw things away. He'd change it and then throw it away. And then Rich would say, well, what about this and what about that? And he said he really had to work on, and that's why it's important to support each other. He really had to work on, okay, let me listen to what he's saying because he is the co-author, and, try and communicate that together. Because you think you have a great idea and you think, well, what I had was terrible, I'm throwing it away. But what if later on in the story you needed to go back to that and say, no, they should have kept going in the same direction they were going in. You should never have changed that. Is everyone following me on that?
Yeah, that
And I
is
know in script writing
the
it's the same
biggest
way.
thing with collaboration. You both have to get to the point where you're going in the same direction. Because when you start, of course, you both have different visions.
Right.
And you've
Yeah.
got to make that vision come together or it will not work.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of compromise, and you really do have to listen and take it in and say, okay, that will work. Okay, I understand that. And then you start to understand where the other person's coming from and vice versa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. The pros sound great, right? But there are cons as well. I know someone who ended up throwing out the original 3,000 copies of her book and started over with a new title, a new ISBN, and mentioned hiring an attorney when she discovered that her co-author had plagiarized his section of their book. Here are some of the cons to be aware of. So let's go with Rick on the conflicts.
Not all conflict is bad. Sometimes hashing out difference of opinion will lead to a better book. However, to avoid unproductive conflict, be sure to have a written understanding of how you will resolve conflicts and address differences of opinion. Also choose your collaborator wisely.
And that's interesting because you, Chris, are the one who sought out Rick. So how did you narrow that down? That's the part that I'm interested in.
Well, it helped that we had the screenplay.
Okay.
So we already had the framework, and he agreed that story was great. And also, as long as everyone does everything I want, collaboration works out fine.
But when you, yeah, as long as they do what you want. When you set out, I know Rick can't have been the only one who probably responded to your need for a collaborator.
Well, I got a couple responses. Either there were not enough time, but I made it clear that I was doing this in the hopes of promoting the screenplay, getting that sold. And so it had to be a hit. So the one response I got was, well, that's too much pressure. I can't write a hit.
Oh,
well,
no.
then what are you writing for? Then?
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't write a hit.
Yeah.
But I never got to a point with anyone else where they were reading the thing and giving me their feedback.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have to go through that experience.
Well, another
Now,
thing that
I've
was
done-
interesting you told me is you said you had feedback from somebody who said, Well, I don't want to write something that I didn't have the original idea of.
Right. A lot of people, and I understand that concept because I get approached for screenplays and stuff to work on.
Right.
And I'm like, I got so many of my own original ideas. I don't want to work on another person's idea that I might like or be able to get into. Now I would have to really love the story and go, oh, that's brilliant. I can really help it.
Right.
And that would be the only way I could join in on a collaboration, I would think. So, and I understand where those people are coming from because I felt sort of the same way.
And that's the way why Chris and I worked so well together. I had the option. I've read that screenplay, and if I hadn't liked it or wanted to work on it, there was no agreement there. I agreed to look at it. I loved it. I fell in love with that script. I said, there's no way I am not doing this.
So from beginning to end, once you started reading the script until you finished it, how long was that?
7 years.
7 years, really?
My.
Well, I had other things going on, and at one point, about 4 years into it, we were ready to give it out to some beta readers, and we had about 12 different character viewpoints in the thing, and somebody said that's way too many. So now we had to figure out how to take 12. I mean, some of them were minor, 12, and condense them down to 3, which meant some cases it was fine, but in other cases we had to eliminate whole scenes because they were in someone else's viewpoint, took place in another part of the world. We had to figure out how to tell that same story from 3 perspectives.
But Chris, in a script, you couldn't have had 12 characters in the script.
He had more.
Well, it's a big. Now, what it is with screenplays, you can jump around. You can show another city and things that are going on, and then come right back to the main part of the story. And
without all that description.
Right. And when in a novel, you say, okay, well, why am I here? Why am I seeing this?
Yeah, because visually you're going to see it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'll jump all over the place sometimes, but it all makes sense in the screenplay. But when you try to put it down in the novel, you're like, okay, so am I going to jump around into someone else's head that's in that scene? So we had to do some rework to make it, fit a prose
Plausible.
style. Yeah.
So the script reads different than the novel then.
Right. It would be like someone took the book and then made an adaptation.
Well,
So they're getting the key points out without all the range and details that.
good example. How's Star Wars open? Star Wars opens as an omniscient viewpoint of those ships coming into battle.
Yeah.
Whose point of view are you showing on that?
Yeah.
And then you go into the ship with everyone running around. You don't even get into Princess Leia's, or you get into, I think, C-3POs. But in a novel, you can't do that. You have to. Somebody has to be experiencing it.
Yeah.
Who's going to be outside in space watching it happen?
Yeah. Well, and that happens all the time. A lot of times a novel, especially at a movie, in order to draw the audience in, will start with the ending of the novel. Like there'll be a scene from the end of the novel, not maybe the whole scene, but it'll give you an idea of what's about to happen, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat. Like, how did it lead up to that, and why did that happen?
Yeah.
You got to hook them in the first 10
You hook them in
minutes.
the first 10 minutes. Yeah. So a script can read different than
Right.
a novel.
Definitely.
So, all right. And Rick, I'm going to let you take number 2 under.
Oh, misunderstandings. You may think you're on the same page about issues, but you don't want to wait until a crisis to realize you're not. Think of all possible scenarios for writing, editing, publishing, and promoting your book. Address your expectations ahead of time. I promise another post shortly on issues to consider to prevent misunderstandings. The list is extensive.
Yeah, and I'm curious. If you didn't talk on the phone, you strictly communicated by email. I don't think I could do that. I really don't. Because I'm one of those, I have to talk to the person.
Me too.
Even on the show, I make a point to meet someone before I have them on the show, or at least speak to them before I have them on the show. It gives me I don't know. Maybe it's different than collaboration with a book. But for me, I need to know something about that person and where their mindset is, so we know what we can talk about on the air. I guess, though, with a book, it's all about that book.
Well, it's sort of the same thing anyway, but I think we wrote enough detail in our emails so that this is my point of view, this is why I want this to go this way or whatnot, and then Rick would write his rebuttal, and okay, I can see what, and then so we clarify things in the emails. So it's still just a form of communication, but yes, you don't see them, you don't hear the voices, which is sometimes good because they're going, oh, that's a terrible idea. How about this? So all he gets was, hey, how about this?
Yeah.
So it makes it so much safer.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, keep in mind, too, we're a 3-hour time difference.
Yeah.
I live in the East Coast. He lives basically West Coast.
Right.
So, finding a time to communicate. But it worked fine with email,
Well, it might be why it took 7 years, though.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd have that kind of patience.
Believe me, time,
you work
time
on a
flies.
lot of you work on other stuff, and it keeps going. Like I'm working on two new books now, and I've been. Some people want me to write some short films for him, so I do that stuff while he's doing his part. Then he'll send me his results, and I'll work on that while he's doing his thing. So since we always keep busy, you don't really notice too. Wait a second, aren't we supposed to be releasing a book now?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
I know, that's just amazing.
I don't either, Janet.
Yeah, I
agree with
know. All right, and Chris, I'm going to let you take number 3 there.
All right, so the limelight. If you hire a publicist, how do you decide who gets the big opportunities? Sometimes you may be able to be interviewed together, but many times the newspapers or talk shows want one person. How do you decide who gets what and who should be pitched for which opportunities?
Have you guys discussed that?
Well, it's not come up yet. Like now today, this is the first time that we've been together this weekend and doing the interview. So I think for the most part, we're not going to be together doing these things.
Right, because it just so happens you both came out together to release it, kind of like a
Right.
book release party. And you're doing the radio show for the first time. So who knows what's going to happen after this? Rick has some, notoriety in what he's done in the past. You have notoriety in the movie business a little. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Because what they're basically saying is what's going to happen when a PR person says, well, they want you, Chris, but they don't want you, Rick. Or they're going to say, I want you, Rick, but I don't want you, Chris.
The way I'm hoping is he can cover everything east of the Mississippi, and I'll cover everything west of the Mississippi.
That's smart,
In a
actually.
perfect world, yes.
Right. So, I go to Comic-Cons every once in a while. If I have a short film in there or I'm helping out with a film, I'll go up to the Comic-Cons. Well, I can also promote the books while I'm there.
There you go.
But I'm not going to go all the way to the East Coast for one of those things. But, Rick can. So
Yeah.
it works out. Like we're October at the Las Vegas, it was a book fair.
Yes,
I'll
Las
be
Vegas Valley
driving
Book
back
Festival.
up here to, help promote the book then.
Well, for you, it's easy to come here.
Right.
Yeah. And that is kind of neat, though. But I'm just glad that you guys met
Yeah.
We are
as far as
too.
in person, so that now when you're talking about the book, you realize, you have some idea of each other's personalities. To me, it would be hard to do this if you've never met. Now, you wrote the book and you never met, and you're out there doing publicity, and you stayed on the East Coast and he stayed on the West Coast or whatever. I don't know how you could do that.
You'd be surprised what you can get over email.
Yeah, I realize that now. I don't know if you experienced it, but I have, where if you talk to a person enough online and you email with them and you chat, I feel like I get the same sense as if I met them in person.
I just
And so-
realized there was a whole movie based on this.
Oh.
Oh, was there?
You've Got Mail.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, I work with people remote all the time in my day job. And so when I go to meet them, I'm like, oh, you're no different than I thought through all our communications. I mean, the looks might be different, of course, but
Yeah.
personality and everything, it comes through with enough communication online.
I like FaceTime.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
want anyone
I'm-
to see my face.
No.
All right, Chris, I'm going to let you take number 4 on this.
All right, so money. Have a very clear sense of how you'll pay expenses. The author above footed the bill for many items. When she did an open bank account with her co-author, he cleaned her out. Well, that would be terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, bad idea, too. I don't know why you would connect accounts. But
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you guys about this.
yeah, so
too.
pay attention to the red flags. If you're equal collaborators, share expenses from the get-go so one person doesn't end up contributing more than the other.
Yeah, and so how are you guys handling this? Like, if you just do publicity on the West Coast, you just pay for going to do your publicity, and if you're on the East Coast, you just there's no issue there, or how do you do
Well,
that?
that's pretty much what we had a contract, and I think anytime you have a business, it's this business relationship.
It is a business, yeah.
So you need a contract that explains everything and how. We even put conflict resolution clauses in the contract, as well as what we're going to spend. So if like internet, advertising, if we agree together on the expense, then we would split it. if I went up here to do the book signing here, I would just cover that because I'm the one going, and he would cover his expenses. And so we have that in the contract. So I don't foresee any kind of fight over it.
We just trusted each other pretty much from the beginning, I think.
Yeah, I bet you don't want to get in a collaboration with someone you don't really trust. So if you have any red flags where you're like, well, I don't really know, but
Right.
you really want to be in a long-term working relationship with that person.
Right. But I'm just curious, though, do you use any of those expenses as write-offs, or will you be using them as write-offs?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm sure, yeah.
Okay. And
This
they
is
just
a write-off for me because I had to fly out here.
Oh, sure, the whole
specifically
trip,
for this.
with
Yeah, the
everything
whole trip.
is a write-off
yeah
from both
yeah.
of you.
So that goes back to the publisher, who handles the finances there.
Me.
Since the publisher's sitting here.
Yes, and giving out the royalties. Yes, it would be split unless they would have some other kind of contract with us saying, oh, he's 60-40 or something like that.
Well, our greatest fear has happened. We thought we were going to be running out of time, and we literally are down to the last few minutes of the show.
Oh, my gosh.
So I would like to thank our guests, Lance Taubold, Chris Keaton, and Rick Taubold, along with my co-host, Janet Corsi. Lance, where again can we learn more about your book? Or books?
Go onto Amazon, Barnes & Noble. They're available everywhere. And go onto the 1330 Books website, and you can see all of the books that I've written or have collaborated on.
That's right. You're a collaborator as well.
Or been in. That there are a lot of anthologies that are there, too.
And Rick, where can we learn more about your books and this book coming up?
My website is my name, ricktaubold.com.
And that's Taubold.
Yep. I'm the only one in the world, as far as I know, Rick Taubold.
Okay.
And I also have a blog called Write Well, Write to Sell. that I do
Wonderful
on-
blog.
On writing. You can go out and check that out as well.
All right. And Chris.
My website's chris-keaton.com. Just like Michael Keaton, but with a Chris. The mosaicnovel.com is also where you can learn about the Mosaic. And all the books are up on Amazon, all the online booksellers, really.
Okay, great. Well, you can find the video of our past shows and this show as well. It will be posted on youtube.com/aspects of writing, and aspects of writing is all one word. That's youtube.com/aspects of writing. Or you can go to our website at aspectsofwriting.com, and we have all of our links there to Roku, YouTube. Yes, you had a question? No? Oh, I thought maybe you had a question. Okay. And there you also find our show is syndicated on iHeartRadio, so you can find a link to iHeart there, or just go to iHeartRadio.com/podcast/aspects-of-writing. And I won't give you the number, so just go to aspects-of-writing, and you can find it. Also, we broadcast on AMFM247.com, and we're on 16 terrestrial stations. In addition, we archive all of our shows on the Aspects of Writing website. So once this airs, which I think will be September 1st, then that's when we will post it on our site, so you can go back there and listen to the archived version. So until next week, this is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it. And I want to thank everyone for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Great
everyone.
show.